The night my sister screamed my name across the emergency room, she didn't recognize me. She was bleeding, shaking, terrified, begging for a doctor. And when I stepped into the harsh white light and said, "I'm your attending physician," the color drained from her face faster than the blood soaking through her dress. She had erased me from her life with a single lie. Now her life was in my hands. The sliding doors of the ER burst open as paramedics wheeled her in. 32-year-old female, abdominal trauma, internal bleeding suspected. One of them shouted, "I didn't look at the patient at first. I was too busy pulling on gloves, snapping into professional mode." Trauma didn't scare me anymore. Loss didn't shake me. But then I heard her voice. "Please call my husband. Don't let me die." That voice. I looked up and the past slammed into me like a speeding truck. Ava, my older sister, the golden child, the girl who once braided my hair before school, the same girl who stood in our parents' living room 7 years ago, tears streaming down her face, and told them I had stolen from her. Not just money, her future. "You forged my signature, Maya," she had sobbed back then, holding up fake documents I had never seen before. "You tried to transfer my scholarship funds into your account." I remember standing there shaking, unable to breathe. I didn't. I swear I didn't. But my parents didn't look at me. They looked at her. She was engaged to a rising businessman. She was the pride of the family. I was the quiet med student drowning in debt. It was easier to believe I was jealous. It was easier to believe I wanted what she had. Within a week, I was cut off financially. Within a month, I was told to leave the house. Within a year, I stopped answering their calls. The scholarship scandal followed me through medical school. I worked night shifts at diners, slept in libraries, survived on vending machine coffee. Every time I thought about quitting, I heard my sister's voice. "You tried to steal from me." I didn't steal, but I paid. Now she lay on my operating table, her designer heels discarded on the floor, her expensive wedding ring glinting under surgical lights. Life has a twisted sense of humor. "Doctor," the resident beside me whispered. "She's crashing." I stepped forward, calm, detached, professional. "Prep her for emergency surgery. Type and cross match. Let's move." Ava's eyes fluttered open as we rolled her toward the OR. She squinted at me, confused. Then recognition dawned slowly, painfully. Maya?" Her voice cracked on my name like it was something fragile. I didn't answer. Inside the operating room, the world shrank to monitors and metal instruments. My hands moved with precision, muscle memory taking over. Incision, suction, clamp, repair. But my mind replayed every moment of that night years ago. The way she wouldn't meet my eyes. The way her fiancé, Daniel, stood silently behind her, watching me like I was a criminal. Daniel, as if summoned by memory, he burst into the hospital corridor 2 hours later, expensive suit wrinkled, face pale with fear. I watched him through the glass as a nurse tried to calm him. "I need the best surgeon," he demanded. "Money is not an issue. You already have the best surgeon," I thought. When the surgery ended successfully, I removed my gloves slowly. She was stable. She would live. And that's when I made my decision. Not to hurt her. To expose her. The next morning, I walked into her private recovery room with her chart in hand. She looked smaller in the hospital bed. Vulnerable. Human. Her husband stood when I entered and froze. "Maya!" he whispered. "Good morning," I said evenly. "Your wife is out of danger." Ava couldn't look at me. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Then she spoke. "You're a doctor here?" "Yes!" Another silence. Heavier this time. Daniel cleared his throat. "We're grateful. Truly grateful. 7 years ago, he had watched as my parents threw me out without saying a word in my defense." I stepped closer to the bed. The internal bleeding was severe. Another hour, and it would have been too late. Ava's fingers tightened around the blanket. "Thank you." The words sounded foreign in her mouth. I studied her face. The perfect makeup was gone. The confidence was cracked. And for the first time, I saw fear not of dying, but of me. "You know," I said softly, "it's strange how life works. One lie can destroy someone's future. And years later, that same future might be the only thing standing between you and a coffin." Daniel looked confused. Ava looked like she'd been slapped. "Maya!" she whispered, warning in her tone. But I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. After my shift, I didn't go home. I went to storage, to the box I had kept for 7 years. Inside were printed emails, transaction logs, and one small USB drive I had found accidentally the night I was packing to leave. I hadn't opened it back then. I was too broken. But 3 months ago, while cleaning my apartment, I finally plugged it in. What I found changed everything. Bank transfers. Forged documents, edited PDFs all created from Ava's laptop, and one recorded audio file. Her voice. "She's out of the picture. The scholarship money gets redirected to our joint account. It's temporary," she had told someone. "She won't recover from this. She's too soft." I never confronted her. I waited, because revenge isn't loud. It's strategic. 3 days later, Ava was discharged. Her parents came to pick her up. I hadn't seen them in years. My mother gasped when she saw me in a white coat. My father's eyes filled with something that looked dangerously close to regret. "You never told us you were working here." My mother said softly. "You never asked," I replied. Ava shifted uncomfortably in her wheelchair. That's when Daniel's phone rang. He stepped aside to answer it, his expression changing from confusion to shock. What do you mean frozen? He snapped. That account handles all of our foundation funds? Foundation funds. The same charity Ava publicly ran in my name after I left. In honor of my struggling sister, she used to say in interviews. I watched as panic spread across her face. She looked at me slowly, and I smiled for the first time in 7 years. Something wrong? I asked gently. Her breathing quickened. What did you do? I stepped closer so only she could hear me. I didn't lie. I didn't steal. I didn't ruin you. My voice was calm, controlled. But I did send a very interesting file to your board of directors this morning. Her eyes widened in horror. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. 2 hospital administrators approached, along with a man in a dark suit holding a folder. And when he said her full name in a cold, official tone, I knew the real surgery was about to begin. The man in the dark suit didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Ava Sinclair, he said calmly, each syllable sharp as a scalpel. We need to ask you a few questions regarding financial discrepancies in the Sinclair Hope Foundation. My parents looked confused. Daniel looked furious. Ava looked like she might faint all over again. This is a hospital. Daniel snapped. You can't just... We're not here to cause a scene. The man replied smoothly. But the timing is urgent. Several accounts were flagged early this morning after an anonymous submission of documentation. Anonymous. Ava's eyes locked onto mine. They were no longer afraid, they were calculating. Maya, she breathed, forcing a weak smile. Can we talk? Alone. I tilted my head. You had 7 years! Her jaw tightened. My father stepped forward, voice shaking. What is this about? Ava runs that foundation with integrity. It helps hundreds of families. Does it? I asked quietly. The hallway felt too small, too bright. Nurses slowed their steps, pretending not to listen. Daniel's phone rang again. He answered, pacing. What do you mean the media is calling? Who leaked this? Ava's fingers dug into the wheelchair armrests. You think this fixes what happened? She hissed under her breath. You think humiliating me makes you whole? Humiliating her. The word echoed. You humiliated me, I said softly. In front of everyone we loved. You let them believe I was a thief. You watched them disown me. You survived, she shot back. Clearly? Yes. I agreed. I did. The suited man opened his folder and pulled out printed bank statements. Even from a distance, I recognized the formatting. The same files I had stared at in my apartment at 3 in the morning, heart pounding, hands trembling. These transfers, he continued, redirected scholarship funds and later charitable donations into a private joint account under your name and your husband's. Daniel stopped pacing. What? He demanded. Ava didn't look at him? I never authorized. Daniel began. Oh, you authorized plenty, I said. My voice still calm. Check the digital signatures. They match your encrypted ID. His face drained of color. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. 7 years ago, he had been the silent witness. The man who could have spoken up. The man who chose comfort over truth. Daniel, Ava whispered urgently, tell them this is a mistake. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at the documents. At the numbers. Millions. The foundation had grown far beyond a small scholarship. It was a brand now, interviews, awards, galas, all built on a lie. My mother turned to Ava, confusion giving way to fear. Ava, is this true? No, she said quickly. This is manipulation. Maya's been jealous since we were kids. She's always wanted what I had. There it was. The old narrative. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not pain, clarity. You're right, I said evenly. I did want something you had. Everyone looked at me. I wanted parents who believed me. Silence. Heavy. Crushing. My father's shoulders sagged as if someone had finally cut the strings holding him upright. We thought, he began, then stopped. We thought the evidence was clear. It was forged, I replied. From her laptop. I have the metadata logs. Timestamps. Voice recordings. Ava's head snapped toward me. You wouldn't. I already did. The suited man nodded. The audio file was particularly compelling. Daniel's breathing became shallow. Audio! I watched realization crawl across his face like a slow infection. She said it was temporary. He muttered. You told me it was just until your sister dropped out. You said she'd never know. Ava's composure cracked. You agreed. She snapped. You said we needed the money to secure the business expansion? And you said she was too weak to fight back. He shot back. My mother covered her mouth. My father closed his eyes. The golden child was unraveling in a hospital corridor. I stepped back, giving them space, not out of mercy, but because this wasn't about screaming. It was about exposure. The suited man cleared his throat. Mrs. Sinclair, due to the severity of these findings, the board has voted to suspend you immediately pending full investigation. Authorities have also been notified. A nurse nearby pretended to adjust an IV stand, clearly listening. Ava looked at me again, and this time there was no calculation left. Just desperation. You could have talked to me, she whispered. You didn't have to destroy everything. Destroy. The word felt misplaced. I didn't destroy you, I said quietly. I saved you. She stared at me like I'd gone insane. You built a life on stolen foundations? I continued. The longer it stood, the harder it would collapse. Today it's reputation. Tomorrow it could have been prison. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. It might still be. Footsteps echoed again, this time more official. Security, and behind them, 2 uniformed officers. My father moved as if to shield Ava, then hesitated. 7 years ago, he had shielded her from me. Now he didn't know who needed protection. An officer spoke gently. Ma'am, we need you to come with us to answer some questions. She just had surgery. My mother protested. And she's medically stable. I interjected professionally. I performed it myself. The officers paused, glancing at me with brief recognition. Doctor? The title felt different now. Heavier. Earned. Ava's hands trembled. Maya, please. That word? Please. I studied her face. The same face that once cried convincingly in our living room. The same lips that shaped my downfall. But now the tears were real. I begged too, I reminded her softly. You didn't listen. Her breathing quickened, panic rising as the reality closed in. Daniel stepped back, creating distance between them. I need to call my lawyer, he muttered. Of course he did. As the officers gently helped Ava stand, she winced from the fresh stitches. I felt a flicker of instinct, the doctor in me wanting to steady her. I didn't move. This wasn't my surgery anymore. As they began escorting her down the hallway, she twisted slightly to look at me one last time. I was scared, she said, voice breaking. You were smarter than me, more driven. Mom and Dad were starting to see it. I thought if you left, everything would stay simple. There it was. Not greed, fear. I never wanted your life, I replied. I just wanted mine. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She hesitated at the threshold, eyes searching mine for something. Mercy, forgiveness, maybe even hatred. I gave her none of it. The doors slid shut, and just like that, the girl who erased me from her world disappeared from the hospital corridor. My mother sank into a chair, sobbing quietly. My father stood frozen, staring at the closed elevator as if it might reopen and undo the last 10 minutes. Daniel avoided my gaze entirely. I adjusted the sleeves of my white coat, feeling the weight of 7 years lift, not all at once, but enough to breathe fully. This was never about revenge in the way people imagine it. Not screaming, not violence. It was about truth, and truth, when timed correctly, cuts deeper than any blade. My pager buzzed. Another patient needed me. Life didn't pause for family drama. I took one last look at my parents. They looked smaller now, older. We were wrong, my father said hoarsely. I nodded once. I know. And then I turned, walking back through the double doors of the emergency room, the same doors she had burst through hours earlier, bleeding and terrified. Only this time, I wasn't the sister she betrayed. I was the doctor who survived. The ER swallowed me again, bright lights and urgent voices replacing the echo of my sister's collapse. A child with a broken arm, an elderly man with chest pain. A teenager trembling from a panic attack. Pain didn't care about scandals or family implosions. It arrived on stretchers and in wheelchairs, demanding attention. I moved through it all like I always did. Steady hands, calm tone, precise decisions. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. For 7 years, I had imagined this moment differently. I thought revenge would feel explosive, triumphant, like fireworks cracking across a dark sky. Instead, it felt quiet, controlled, almost clinical. Around midnight, when the rush finally slowed, I stepped into the staff lounge. The television mounted in the corner was muted, but the headline scrolling across the bottom was unmistakable. Local Piloterian Vistigayo far Financial Farayuad. Even without sound, I recognized the footage. Ava at a gala, smiling for cameras. Ava cutting a ribbon outside a children's center. Ava speaking about integrity and compassion. The hypocrisy would be dissected by morning. A young nurse glanced at me nervously. Dr. Maya, that's your sister? Right, I met her eyes without flinching. Yes! I'm sorry, for what? She hesitated. Must be hard. I considered that. It was harder before, I replied. She nodded slowly as if understanding more than I said. When my shift ended at 3 a.m., exhaustion hit me all at once. I changed out of my coat and walked into the cool night air. The parking lot was almost empty, except for one car. My father stood beside it. For a second, I considered turning around, but running had been my old pattern. Tonight wasn't about old patterns. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow, as if certainty had been holding him upright all these years and now it was gone. I wasn't sure you'd come out this way, he said quietly. I work here, I replied. I know. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything unsaid. I failed you. The words landed heavier than any accusation ever had. I should have investigated. I should have asked more questions. But Ava was fragile, emotional. You were strong, independent. I thought you'd be fine. I let out a slow breath. You didn't think I needed protection. He didn't deny it. When you left, he continued, voice cracking. Your mother cried for weeks. But every time she tried to call you, Ava would break down again. We felt trapped between you. You chose her. I said, yes. The honesty stung less than I expected. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he added quickly. I just needed you to know I see it now. Seeing it now didn't erase 7 winters of working double shifts. It didn't erase the nights I fell asleep hungry. It didn't erase the humiliation of being labeled a thief. But it did something else. It closed a chapter. I didn't expose her for you, I said. Or for Mom. I did it because the truth deserved air. He nodded slowly. And because she would have kept going, he asked. Yes. We stood there under the dim parking lot lights, not reconciled, not healed, but no longer strangers. Your mother wants to see you, he said carefully. I know. Will you? Not tonight. He accepted that. As he got into his car, he paused. You became everything we hoped for. A faint, almost ironic smile touched my lips. I always was. He drove away without another word. I sat in my own car for several minutes before starting the engine. My phone buzzed repeatedly on the passenger seat, messages from unknown numbers, news outlets. Old acquaintances resurfacing now that my name was connected to a headline. I ignored them all. But one message caught my attention. Daniel. I hesitated before opening it. We need to talk. Alone. Of course we did. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove home to my small apartment, the one I had rented during residency and never bothered to upgrade. The furniture was simple. The walls bare. It had never felt temporary to me. It felt earned. I placed the USB drive on my kitchen counter and stared at it. 7 years of silence had lived inside that small piece of plastic. 7 years of waiting. And now it was done. Or was it? The next morning, the hospital buzzed with tension. Administrators whispered in corners. A legal representative requested to speak with me regarding the documentation I had submitted. I answered their questions calmly, providing timestamps, digital trails, and the sequence of how I discovered everything. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. Facts were powerful enough. By noon, the news had escalated. Ava and Daniel were both being formally charged with fraud and embezzlement. Assets frozen, properties under review. The Foundation's board announced a full audit. I stood in an empty exam room and watched the coverage on my phone. There was a clip of Ava being escorted from a building, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked smaller than I remembered. Human. For a split second, guilt flickered, not for exposing her, but for the part of me that had once loved her without condition. My phone rang again. This time I answered. Maya, Daniel's voice came through, strained and hollow. You've made your point? My point wasn't for you, I replied. You could have warned me. You didn't warn me. Silence. She manipulated me too, he said finally. She told me you'd eventually come after us. That you were obsessed. I almost laughed. Obsessed. I was surviving. I never thought it would go this far, he muttered. It went this far the night you stayed silent. He had no response. I won't testify against her, he said suddenly. If I do, she goes down completely. She already has, I said evenly. What you're deciding now is whether you fall with her. Another long pause. You're cold, he whispered. No, I corrected him. I'm clear. I hung up before he could say anything else. That evening, as I prepared to leave work, a familiar figure stood near the nurse's station. My mother, her eyes were red, but she stood straighter than I'd seen in years. Can we talk? She asked softly. We walked outside together, away from curious ears. I went to see Ava, she said. She asked about you. I didn't respond. She said she was jealous, that she thought you'd outshine her, that everything spiraled after that first lie. I know, I said quietly. My mother's hands trembled. Why didn't you come back? Even after you became a doctor? Would you have believed me then? Her silence was answer enough. Tears slid down her cheeks. We were wrong? Yes, she nodded, accepting it without defense. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. She continued. But I don't want to lose both my daughters? The words hung in the air. You haven't lost me, I said carefully. But I'm not the girl who left that house. I know. For the first time, I saw not the mother who chose sides, but a woman confronting the consequences of that choice. As she walked away, I felt something unexpected. Not victory. Release. But deep down, beneath the calm surface I had mastered so well, one question lingered. When Ava finally stands in a courtroom, when she looks at me across that divide, will this truly feel finished? Or is the real ending still waiting to be written? The courtroom smelled like polished wood and quiet judgment. I hadn't planned to attend. For weeks, I told myself I didn't need to see it. The investigations were complete. The digital forensics were airtight. The board members had testified. The bank records had spoken louder than any sibling rivalry ever could. But when the trial date was announced, something in me knew I had to be there. Not for revenge, for closure. The courtroom was nearly full journalists, former donors, curious onlookers drawn by scandal. At the defense table sat Ava and Daniel, separated by inches that felt like miles. They hadn't looked at each other since walking in. Ava looked thinner, pale. The confidence she used to wear like perfume was gone. No designer glow could mask the exhaustion now carved into her face. When she finally glanced up and saw me sitting in the second row, she froze. Not anger, not hatred, something softer. Regret. The prosecution laid everything out with clinical precision. Bank transfers traced back to her laptop. The scholarship redirection, the foundation funds siphoned slowly, carefully over years. The audio file, her voice played aloud in the silent courtroom. Once she's out of the picture, the scholarship money gets redirected. She's too soft. The words echoed through the room like a verdict of their own. I didn't look at her while it played. I didn't need to. Daniel took the stand first. His lawyer had negotiated a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation. He admitted to signing off on transfers, claimed he had believed it was temporary at first, claimed he didn't understand how far it had gone. When Ava's turn came, the room felt heavier. She stood slowly, hands clasped, eyes scanning the room until they found mine again. For years, she began, voice unsteady. I told myself I did it because I was protecting what I built, because I deserved the opportunities I fought for. But that wasn't the truth. The judge watched her closely. I was afraid, she continued. My sister was brilliant, determined, the kind of person who earns respect without demanding it. I was used to being admired. When I realized she might surpass me, I panicked. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. I thought if she lost her scholarship, she'd drop out. I thought she'd forgive me eventually. I never imagined it would spiral into this. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. I ruined her reputation. I let our parents believe she was a thief. And then I built a public image on the very thing I stole from her, integrity. Her voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am sorry. For the first time in 7 years, she said it without manipulation, without performance, just truth. The judge delivered the sentence an hour later. Daniel received a reduced term due to cooperation, 3 years with possibility of parole. Ava received 7 years. The same number of years I spent rebuilding my life from nothing. The symmetry was almost poetic. As officers moved toward her, she turned once more in my direction. This time, I stood, not dramatically, not for attention, just to meet her eyes at the same level. For a moment, we were no longer doctor and defendant, not victim and betrayer, just two sisters who made very different choices. She gave me the smallest nod and acknowledgement, not a plea. Then she was led away. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. I ignored them all, stepping into the sunlight with a strange sense of calm. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. It's over, I typed back, yes. But endings are rarely loud. They don't always arrive with fireworks or applause. Sometimes they arrive quietly like a door clicking shut. Weeks passed. The hospital settled back into routine. New patients, new emergencies. New lives intersecting with mine in fleeting, fragile moments. One evening, I received a letter, handwritten. Ava's handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it slowly, Maya. I've replayed that night in the living room more times than I can count. The way you looked at me, confused, hurt, begging to be believed. I told myself you'd recover, that you were stronger than me. I weaponized your strength against you. Prison gives you time. Too much time. I see now that I didn't just steal money. I stole trust. I fractured a family. You didn't destroy me. I did that myself. If there's one thing I'm grateful for, it's that you didn't let my lie define you. You became everything I was afraid you'd be. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only hope one day we can speak without this weight between us. Ava. I folded the letter carefully. For a long time, I sat there in silence. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, it's not an obligation. It's a process, slow, uneven, deeply personal. But something inside me had already shifted. I no longer felt the tightness in my chest when I heard her name. No longer replayed the betrayal before sleep. The truth had done its work. Months later, my mother invited me to dinner. I hesitated but went. The house looked the same. The living room where everything fell apart stood untouched, as if frozen in time. We sat at the table awkwardly at first, conversation slow, careful. But then my father asked about a difficult surgery I'd performed. My mother asked about my research publication. They listened, really listened. Not to compare, not to measure, just to understand. The absence at the table was noticeable, but not suffocating. After dessert, my mother reached across and squeezed my hand. "We're proud of you," she said. This time, I believed her. As I drove home that night, I realized something unexpected. Revenge had never been the destination. Freedom was. Freedom from being the misunderstood sister, the accused, the exile. Freedom from carrying anger like armor. Ava would serve her sentence. She would have years to reflect, to rebuild if she chose to. And I would continue doing what I fought so hard to do, save lives, including hers, when fate placed her on my table. That was the irony of it all. The night she almost died, I didn't hesitate. Because despite everything, I am a doctor, and before revenge. Before justice. Before closure, I chose who I wanted to be. And in the end, that choice mattered more than any lie ever told.